Hi everybody and good morning. Welcome to this morning's Accentuate by K3 Hub session. For those who haven't met me virtually before, my name is Marie Waiteson and I'm a Managing Director at Quantuma, and on behalf of our parent company, the K3 Capital Group, I'm responsible for the K3 Hub, which is a member network for professional advisors developed by us and other companies within the K3 Capital Group. Since we launched in the spring of last year, over 2,300 like-minded professionals from across the country have joined our network. And through the network, they've accessed a range of CPD and training sessions, not dissimilar to today's session, and referral fees for certain types of work referred into our group. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce our speakers. So today we have an R&D technical update delivered by my colleague, Matt Timby, and a personal branding masterclass for you delivered by my colleague, Joe Edwards. Before I introduce you to our first speaker, a few pieces of housekeeping. We are recording today's session and it will be placed on the K3 Hub website next week. The Q&A function is open, so please do feel free to ask questions as we go. I'll put your questions to the speakers at the end of each of the sessions this morning, so please do give me some context to your questions just in case I am holding them back, so that the speakers can recall the points that your questions relate to. And we're often asked this, so just to confirm, we will be circulating the slides today, but it is going to be next week and it will coincide with the recording of the today's session being posted on the website. So, okay, moving on to the first part of today's session. And so as I've already said, very pleased to welcome back our first speaker, Matt Timby. Matt is a director at randd UK Limited, which is a K3 Capital Group company. And as the name suggests, is an R&D tax credits specialist business. Matt has extensive experience in the industry. randd itself has an excellent track record in helping UK businesses successfully claim back millions of pounds using the R&D tax credits incentive. They've secured over 190 million in claims for their clients. They proudly hold 100% success rate for claims and have successfully submitted well in excess of 4,000 claims on behalf of their clients to date. Today, Matt will be considering the additional compliance and anti-abuse measures in respect of R&D tax credits being introduced by HMRC. Matt, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Marie. Yeah, I think just a quick one. I think most of it out there in the K3 Hub know who I am, but I think Marie's introduced me. And Marie, thank you very much, Marie. But yeah, today's going to be just about an update on what's happening within the R&D industry. I'm going to not go through the basics so much of R&D tax credits, but if any of you want to ask those questions later on after the Q&A session, please feel free to ask me any questions about R&D scheme in itself. But I'm taking it from randd that most of the practice accountants out there at least have a basic understanding of R&D, so know where I'm coming from. So just to start the first slide, please, Caroline, on what I'm going to go through today. So yeah, so we're looking at the changes that are coming in from April next year. What happened in or rather what didn't happen in Mr. Quatain's disastrous budget. What's happening within the HMRC with their inquiries recently, and then I've got a couple of client success stories actually. So off the back of that, so we'll try and end on some positive news. So if I could pop through to the first slide, please, Caroline. Yeah, so all this new announcement is going to happen from April 23. So don't forget, I'm talking about accounting periods beginning on the 1st of April onwards. So for most clients, it's going to affect the year ended March 24. So it does seem a long way off, but there is some things that we need to bring into place. Now, these changes aren't new. These were talked about actually when Rishi Sunak, if you remember that, he was the Chancellor back in his autumn statement in 2021 when he announced these changes. Very good autumn statement that was back then. Rishi Sunak is well behind the R&D tax credit scheme, as he made clear in his budget speech. So now he's the Premier, he's in the driving seat, then I think it should be all good for R&D. So what he brought in that particular budget was some new opportunities. So we can now we can bring in some R&D hosting cloud software, cloud-based. I think HMRC reluctantly was a bit behind the times on this in the past. They used to allow R&D software, but of course everything's hosted nowadays, and they didn't quite get a handle on that. So they're now saying that R&D, cloud computing costs, if it's in furtherance of R&D, then that can be claimed now. But we also just need to move away from data sets. So data sets held in the cloud can be used if it's active data. I'm sure, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I'm in the middle of the meeting. Sorry, can you go? See you later. Oh. Sorry about that, guys. You might be short postman Pat's just knocked on the door. Right, sorry. So where did I get to? Say, yeah, just be careful of data sets, which is inactive data, probably not eligible if it's just used, but active data, solely for R&D, can be used. But it's welcome news anyway that there is some more opportunity there for more costs we can claim for. There's some more restrictions also coming in from April onwards, which is to do with workers outside of the UK. Up until now, that's always been allowable as long as the invoices are coming into UK limited companies. From 1st of April onwards, that now won't be allowable. So this kind of thing happens, and just to sort of put a cast iron example for instance, a client of ours, they're a UK limited company based in London, a software development company, but they have a pool of software developers in another country. So in the past, that's fine, as long as the invoice is being paid by the UK limited company, then that's allowable under the scheme. Going forward, that won't now be allowable. So, and it's just part of the government's plan to try and bring R&D more into this country. So does the directors of that company then take that decision from 1st of April onwards, or even now, to move that pool of software developers from another country and bring them all in-house as UK employees, so they're paying pay-as-you-earn and national insurance? And I think that's probably what it's all about. So it is a big restriction in a way, but it can be seen as good news, or positive news for better for this country, and I'm quite behind that. That's fine. One of the biggest restrictions that will come in from 1st of April next year is what HMRC are now calling advance notice of a company's intention to file an R&D tax claim. You might have heard about this, but so up until now we've got a 2-year back window when we can claim R&D tax credits. So to put that into example, if a client came to us now, for instance, with an April year end, it's now the 11th of November 2022. If a client came to me today with an April year end, I've got 2 years in which to make an R&D tax credit claim. So I could file a claim for their April 21 year and their April 22 year, probably 2 years in one go. And I could get that filed before, as long as I get that in before the end of April 23. So I've got 5 or 6 months to do that, then that'll be fine. Under the new rules, if this came in, then I wouldn't be able to file a claim for their April 22 year even, because you've got to file a notice of intention to file an R&D tax credit claim within 6 months after the year end. So that claim now should have been in by the end of October for an April year, and so I'm already 11 days out of time on that one. So just be wary of that. So it's just a case of noticing what R&D opportunities are out there for your practice accountants, and say I've got to file an R&D claim. You've just got to tell HMRC that you're going to intend a claim. You've still got 2 years to file a claim, but unless you get that notification in within 6 months after the year end, then the claim will be invalid. So that's really so it really closes what is currently a 2-year window down to a 6 month window. So that's a huge restriction. So we've just got to be well versed and spot those clients out there that possibly have got an R&D claim. You can file a notice of intention to make an R&D claim and then not actually file it, at least if you've lodged a notice. If it comes to nothing later on, well, that's fine, at least we filed the notice. So just be wary that we might miss some windows there. If I could just move on, please. Right, so Mr. Quatang. For those of you who didn't know him a few months ago, he was head of Bays for the last couple of years before that, and actually doing an admirable job. I did have a meeting with Quatang actually in about a year and a half ago when he was head of Bays. So he was well versed in R&D and understood it completely. So actually, I for one thought it was, when he became Chancellor, I thought he would push R&D on further. However, clearly his political career is now over after the disastrous mini budget. But there we go. But I think I just need to remember that everything that he said is now been reversed. So we're back to where we are. So next year, I'm sure you're all aware that corporation tax is increasing up to 25%, where it's currently only 19%. So big jump there. But its effect on R&D is for those loss-making companies. You may be aware that if an R&D tax company claiming R&D tax credits has a loss in the year, we can surrender those losses for 14.5% tax credit, or of course we can carry them forward as normal and save 19% of next year's tax bill. So there's a 4.5% margin there of decision. Most directors say to me, I'd rather have the cash now, thank you very much. I'd rather have 14.5% cash in my pocket rather than save 19% of next year's tax bill. But from April onwards, that's going to be a lot bigger difference. There's going to be a difference between 14.5% cash now and 25% tax saving last year. So a 10.5% difference in margin on decision there. We'll see if anything comes in next week's budget, although I doubt there'll be any change on that, to be fair, but I don't know if that 14.5% maybe increase in line with that. But at the moment, that's a big difference now on what those decisions will make. But basically, there was no announcements in the mini budget about R&D changes, and even if there was, well, I guess they would have been reversed anyway. But we'll see what Jeremy Hunt has to see next week about R&D, but I don't think that will be changing too much. Can I move to the next slide, please? So yeah, so for you practice accountants, you may have seen these already. HMRC clamping down on certain R&D claims, so which is fine. They should be doing that. HMRC have been absolutely swamped with the number of claims they've had in the last few years. They took on well over 100 staff last year, and that's clearly, even with that, so they had to fill their boots with R&D tax inquiries, but they seem to be busy now as well. So they seem to deploy more of a new tactic, which is to file out blanket claims. You might have seen these letters where they just, a client of yours may have filed an R&D tax credit claim, and then HMRC seem to send a letter out saying, oh, I see you've filed an R&D tax credit claim. Can you just make sure it's right? Here's the rules again, by the way, are you sure it's okay? They're not actually asking you to do anything. And it does say there's no action to be taken in those types of letters. They just basically put in the sort of frighteners on you and thinking, oh, have I done it right? I don't know. Well, of course, we don't need to worry if ourselves and our clients have done everything right, then there's no problem, but they're just asking the question. So there's no action to be taken there. But another new tactic they've also tried is HMRC seem to pass their job onto the fraud office, which is a lot more frightening. So suddenly you've got a letter, your client gets a letter from the fraud office saying we expect, saying we suspect this R&D tax credit claim has been made fraudulently. It doesn't say that definitely was what happened. It just says, again, it seems to be an, are you sure you've done it right, and prove to us that it isn't fraudulent. Again, it's a very vague letter, the same standard questions, nothing really new in that, but it's just a response that needs to go to HMRC with some backup evidence to prove that it isn't fraudulent, that this is a genuine company, a genuine UK limited company, and genuine costs and genuine R&D is happening. But it's a very frightening letter to get from a client's point of view, to suddenly get a letter from the fraud, not even from, it's bad enough getting a letter saying that inquiry into affairs from a tax inspector from the fraud office. It seems really frightening, but again, if we've done everything right, there's really no need to panic. It just seems to be HMRC in conjunction with the fraud office trying to put the frighteners on people in making bogus R&D claims, if you like, and too rightly they should be. But try not to worry about it. Is if anything's for sort of present and correct. Yeah, and there does seem to be this, and HMRC are also looking into much more smaller claims now. I think there was a genuine perception around R&D agents or between accountants that there was a kind of under the radar, if it's less than whatever £1,000 that might be, no one's really going to look at it. Well, actually, I've seen inquiry letters now on very small companies where just one man band, probably software developers only claiming a few £1,000s from HMRC, and even they've been inquired into. So there is no, whatever that perception was about being under the radar, that doesn't really exist, and doesn't really happen anymore. So just be wary of those. If I can move on, please. Caroline, thank you very much. Yeah, just trying to be a bit positive about that. We have had some success stories in both those circumstances where we've had a blank letter going out. I've got some actual case studies where clients of ours, I've got two clients of ours, one called Craftsman Tools and one called Beauty Science UK Limited. And both those scenarios, one had a very vague blank letter from HMRC saying, just can you check the tax inquiry again? It went through all sorts of stages. I did have to have a meeting with the tax inspector, and again, this was a very small claim for one of them, only less than a couple of £1,000s, and they still had to go through the process of talking to the tax inspector, having a meeting with them, sending more evidence. And I just thought it's correct that HMRC should check these claims, of course, but I just thought from a cost-effective point of view, it can't have been in the government's interest overall to do all that, which is probably why they're now sending out some of these more blank letters, just asking the question, but it's very vague about what they're doing. And then I've also had a case, again, a very small claim, actually, as it turns out, but that was another one that came from the fraud office, which just said, can you just check this is doing it right? Again, I just answered that, got it all through to HMRC. That client was a scientist. We often say R&D isn't always about scientists and laboratories and white coats, but in this particular case, it was. This guy was working in a lab and making chemical products for the beauty industry. So very clever chap, scientist, got a letter from the fraud office, was pretty much terrified by it, to be fair, and understandably so. But anyway, we came out the other side of it absolutely clean. He'd done nothing wrong, of course not. And he was absolutely fine. So if you just hold on to your hats, try not to panic. We know we've done everything right. We know that the clients are eligible for R&D tax credits, and that the costings are right. There should be nothing to worry about. So that's at the end of that. And then I think, and have I got an and finally slide, Caroline? Oh, sorry, that's just to work through Craftsman's Tools was the bigger case we had. I think the next slide is beauty science. That's just a few quotes there about what that guy, that's the scientist guy who came out the other side of it. If you pop to the next slide, please, Caroline, just to try and wrap up. On a try and positive note, I'll try and do my John Craven and finally moment. So yeah, don't forget that HMRC are clamping down on claims, and rightly so. But at the end of the day, the UK government still have this pot of money to give away. They want to see innovative companies in the UK pushing forward. This money is there. It's a form of grant to help companies get off the ground and help new projects in this country. And despite the big upheaval in political changes recently, we know that Rishi Sunak is behind the R&D scheme. And as part of that government drive, now he's in the driving seat. They still want R&D to be 2.4%. That's their target of GDP by 2027. R&D tax credit schemes and the RDEC scheme for the large companies is a part of that. So they are behind it. They do want it to work. It's just that HMRC have finally got a grip, and they should have got a grip on this a few years ago. I could see that there are some more fraudulent claims out there and silly claims being made, and they're just putting it, and they are just clamping down on that. Rightly so, they should be. But the UK government are pushing this scheme forward. It is part of the current government's drive to push up R&D scheme in this country. So we should still be making R&D claims for our clients where and when they're valid. Okay, so that's my sort of end of positive news. I'm not quite sure where I am on time. Sorry, Marie. But is there any questions coming in?
Yeah, I think we're fine, Matt, actually. Yeah, so I do have a couple of questions for you. So yeah. One is actually from me, actually. So Matt, I think it was a week or two ago, I was reading the Times, and there was a fairly negative article in there about fraudulent activities and silly claims happening within the R&D scheme. So I guess I've got a two-part question for you here. So do you think this will put businesses and their advisors off claiming in future? And more broadly, what were your thoughts on that particular article?
Yeah, sorry, when I wrote this slide, it was a couple of weeks ago before those Times articles came out. You might have seen those K3 Hub listeners, but yeah, so that probably is the elephant in the room since I made these slides up. Yeah, but absolutely right. The Times are right to highlight, they're actually bringing it to HMRC's attention that there are silly claims out there and there are fraudulent claims out there. It seems to be a bit of an attack on the R&D scheme as a whole, but actually, it's just bringing it to HMRC's attention that those claims are out there that shouldn't be out there. So it's rightly so that journalists, should be, pulling that out and saying these claims aren't valid. I saw some of the, I think some of the examples I'd seen is that people had claimed R&D for creating a new menu in a restaurant or pub or something like that. I've spoke to hundreds of chefs over the last 10 years and said, where they've said, oh, I've created a new menu, a new dish. I've spoke to lots of brewing company, and saying, oh, I've created a new kind of brew, or a new ingredient or a new recipe is not R&D. Absolutely not. Process change might be different, but they, so they shouldn't be claiming those. So it's absolutely right that those articles are out there and bring HMRC's attention. But the scheme as a whole, as I said just in that and finally quote, should still be out there and should still be being pushed, but just avoid the silly claims there. And the articles are saying, look, there are fraudulent schemes out there, fraudulent claims being out there. Well, that's absolutely right. The HMRC should crack down on that, and that's what needs to be cut out. And I think as long as they start to do that now and push that, get rid of those silly claims for new recipes, they should never have been R&D in the first place. Get rid of all that rubbish, and then we can start to focus on what really is R&D and push innovation forward in this country. So that's my take on that.
Very good. Yeah. Thank you for that. A couple more for you. So I've had a here, and I'm just going to read it verbatim, actually. So I'm specifically interested in the R&D tax credit issue, not who is doing them necessarily, but whether clients either get tax refunds or a reduction in CT or a reduction in PAYE or a reduction in VAT. I think you did touch on this before, but it might just be worth recovering that.
It isn't. Let's just be clear. R&D tax credits is a corporation tax reducer. So it's about bringing down your corporation tax bill, or if you're a loss-making company, you get the R&D tax credit. But again, it's levied against corporation tax. It isn't a pay-as-you-earn reducer. It isn't a VAT reducer. So I'm not quite sure where that comment's coming from, but it's possibly, thinking about it, that when you're expecting a tax refund, a corporation tax refund, of course, yeah. If there are other Crown debts that your client owes, if the company owes, let's say, £50,000 worth in unpaid pay-as-you-earn or VAT, but they're expecting a £60,000 tax credit back from R&D, then of course HMRC quite rightly are going to offset one against the other. So in effect, it ends up reducing your VAT or pay-as-you-earn bills if they're going to offset that against other Crown debts. That's possibly where the question is coming from, but that would make sense to me. But it shouldn't really be about that. That's not what the R&D scheme, it's not really in the spirit of the scheme. It's not about saving tax in other areas, but I think it's just that HMRC, clearly, they're not going to give you X amount in one hand if you owe Y amount in other Crown debts in the other hand. So that's probably where there's a bit of offsetting, and that does happen. Fair enough. So I think that answers that question there. But if it doesn't, if that question wants to come back to me or talk to me later on, I'll try and answer that in a different way if I've misunderstood that.
Yep, no problem. And the final one for you here. So Steve's asked, what is the mechanism to notify HMRC that a claim will be made?
If this is the advance notification, at the moment, we still don't know. Now, I have got a meeting with the HMRC's consultative forum actually in a couple of weeks' time at the beginning of December. So I might find out a bit more then. But as of yet, HMRC have just said it's going to be digital. They haven't said how it's actually going to work, this advance notification. So they've just put it out there, it's going to be there. So I'm hoping to answer that in the next few weeks when I have the next meeting with the head of HMRC's R&D units on that. I don't think it'll be a supplementary page to the CT600 like the other R&D changes have been, because that's a final tax return. It is just going to be an advance notification. So I think it'll just be a simple online form that your client must file, or you on your client's behalf must file with HMRC, just to say, I'm going to make an R&D tax credit claim for the year that's just the year I'm currently in, or the year that's just happened. So yeah, we're not sure of the format yet, as far as I'm aware. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks very much, Matt. And one final comment that's coming from a very kind client of yours, which reads, this will probably make you blush. Matt and his team are great at sorting out the R&D claims for our clients. Thank you so much.
Okay, cheers there, Clark. Yeah, I did see your question pop up there. I do appreciate it. Yeah, I think most people in the K3 Hub do know me, and we've certainly got a few clients out there. So yeah, cheers for that. Thanks, Clark. I do appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Matt. Right. Moving on to our next speaker then. So I'm very pleased to be able to welcome back my colleague Joe Edwards. Joe is the MD, of JE Consulting, which is a part of the K3 Capital Group. JE Consulting is an award-winning marketing agency specialising in providing marketing services to firms across the UK, both large and small. Joe's hands-on approach has helped many firms cross-sell to existing clients, generate new clients, and develop profitable services. Today, Joe will be presenting a masterclass on creating your own personal brand and why it's so important. Joe, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Marie, and good morning to everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. So we've got some slides to put things into context this morning. Okay, so this session is all about the brand called you. And this is an interesting I guess presentation to accountants and solicitors, which are the main audience and client base that we work with. But what we've seen happening really over the last few years, certainly pre-COVID, but more so in the last couple of years, is that the competitive space that most firms are now working in, it's becoming more and more difficult to find ways to stand out from this so-called sea of gurus, and social media is pushing that even harder to your potential client base. So we've worked with a lot of our clients on building watertight, what I call personal images for some of the experts within their practice. Sometimes it's all of the partners or directors. Sometimes it's one or two who've got perhaps a bit more time to put into the marketing effort, but also have a particular skill or area of expertise or industry sector that they work in, where we can help to make them slightly famous. And what we'll cover today really is the benefits of looking at the individuals within your firm and building a personal brand for them, and discussing the actionable steps that you could take to perhaps better establish yourself as a knowledgeable, trustworthy point of contact within your area of expertise or your industry sector. And ideally, going back to this point of becoming slightly famous, someone that your clients can't wait to work with. Now, just to, again, put that into context, hopefully by the end of this masterclass, I will have given you some tips that you can action straight away to help you stand out as a unicorn in what in the social media world is becoming a real sea of donkeys. Yeah, be careful whose advice you buy. Somebody once told me, and that's very true when you look at the gurus that put themselves forward on social media. So let's get into some actions. So what's personal branding, first of all? I try to put this into context with our clients by saying that it's time really for us to take a look at what the big brands do. And if you look at how a brand becomes a go-to brand, a lot of the methodology that those brands will use, you can adapt actually in developing your own personal brand. And it doesn't mean that you've got to spend millions of pounds on advertising. There are ways of doing this without spending any budget at all. But just going back to the bigger brands, if you think about it, every day we're branded in one form or another. So it could be the trainers you're wearing, it could be the coffee cup that you're carrying, it could be, you know, the icon on your watch that you're wearing, it could be the pen that you're using. And everybody, every day, in one form or another is branded. Yeah. If you pair that back to, well, how does that relate to professional services? I think, love him or hate him, Jeff Bezos put this into context. And he said that your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that, to me, it sums it up perfectly. The difficulty for anybody is trying to get people to actually tell you what they say about you when you're not in the room. And I'm sure all of us have experienced what I used to call the ugly baby syndrome. You know, nobody will ever really tell you the truth about what they think about you, good or bad, to you personally necessarily. But in essence, good personal branding is knowing where your strengths lie and then playing on them to enhance your business opportunities. And again, let's just bring this back to professional services. So we may be bursting with qualifications. On paper, we might look like the best in the business, but why should a potential client choose you over your rivals? And what have you got that simply can't be found elsewhere? Yeah. And your answer to these questions will really form the foundations of what is your own personal brand and your unique corporate personality, if you like. So I've said here, why do accountants need a personal brand? I think this is true of any professional, whether they're accountants, legal, in banking, in any kind of professional service sector. It's easy to think of us as logical, analytical individuals who spend a lot of time maybe working on the detail of a contract or crunching numbers for clients. But our role, or your role, goes well beyond that. Again, have to remember that the work that you do is incredibly impactful one way or another. For accountants, ultimately, you're responsible for your clients' financial success, For legals, you're responsible for helping those clients protect their businesses, sell their businesses, whatever your role might be. But ultimately, we're helping those individuals live their best lives, give them peace of mind, safe in the knowledge that their personal or business finances are working hard for them behind the scenes. And you'll know this, often you become their confidant, someone they can turn to when they need solid advice, whether that be on or off the record. So when an individual's hunting for a professional advisor, they're not just looking for a person who can deal with a legal issue for them or make them the most money. They want to find someone who can really prove that they have the expert skills to deliver something special. And they want to work with someone who shares their ethos, appreciates their values, and who sets them at ease. And it's true that committing to this road of personal branding is really committing to your own development. But it's especially important because it's a tried and tested means of attracting new clients of the type that you actually want and who actually want to work with you. So let me put this into context with some examples of great, what I consider to be great personal branding. So I'm sure you'll all recognise this individual. Yeah. So Oprah Winfrey, for those of you who don't, is an American talk show host, but she's also an actress, an author. She's a television producer. Her biggest success to date has been the Oprah Winfrey Show, and this is still the highest rated TV programme of its kind in history in the US, and has run a national syndication now for 25 years. Now, she's known as the Queen of all media, which essentially is made of the wealthiest African American of the 20th century. She's the first Black multi-billionaire woman in the US. She gives a lot of that away to charitable programs, certainly 51 million in the last 12 months, I think. So again, you know, her branding now links to her being the philanthropist in the US. But if we just look at her branding and how that's actually been built up, in the early stages of her show, she grew her audience through authenticity, and that comes down to being honest and being smart in your questioning, and those have been the core values really in her personal brand. So creating you know, a realistic brand persona, portraying herself to be very true to her audience, and when she delivers in her talk show, it's her ability to connect with others that makes others want to open up and talk to her. So I'm just going to come back to that word authenticity, and that is the key to her personal brand. Liken that to what we do, and I think any client who's had a really good experience with you will tell you it's because you've been authentic and honest with them. Yeah, and most human beings appreciate that in whoever they're dealing with. Let's move on. And again, I'm going to use a love him or hate him. But you know, you can't underestimate what Elon Musk has achieved. So at the end of last year, his fortune was estimated at 187 billion US dollars, and he's essentially the richest person in the world. But let's just go back to how does this link to how we were talking about Oprah Winfrey? Well, when you listen to Elon Musk speak on stage, you get the impression that he would speak in the same way as if he was having a coffee with you personally. He never sounds formal. He never sounds rehearsed. And even though sometimes it's evident that he's not the best spokesperson, he does a really good job of that one-to-one relationship, and he explains complex ideas in very simple terms, which is odd because he's a real techie and a real geek, and you know, his dreams of this bigger, greater future for humanity based in space somewhere is an absolute focus for him. But when you listen to him speak and you get that sense of, well, he'd talk to me that way if he was having a coffee with me, he does it by talking about or relating things back to his career. And by doing that, by giving anecdotal stories to back up the credibility of what he's talking about, means that he delivers it in a very, again, authentic and honest way. And the final one, again, we'll recognise this guy, Richard Branson. And I think most people would agree that he's, again, he does the same really as Musk. You know, he will talk to an interviewer on TV, and you can imagine him having that same conversation with you over a coffee. He does keep a very youthful essence to how he presents himself. He's quite smiley in what he does. You know, you don't generally see him as an unhappy person, but he does talk from the soul. He does try to be as transparent as possible. He will admit mistakes and own up to mistakes. And his brand now has moved on to being a real champion of youth and encouraging that adventurous spirit in business and giving examples of the mistakes he made along the way. And I think you get a true sense of that kind of humility in his delivery. He does frequently emphasize that your reputation is everything. And I completely agree with that. And that again brings us back to how do you take the lessons of individuals that have such a strong brand into developing your own. So just on that, Branson talks about the 3 R's of personal branding. And those 3 R's are recognition, reputation, and respect. Yeah. So let's just dive into those individually. So bringing it back again to professional services, recognition is all about becoming instantly seen as the go-to specialist in your niche sector, again, whether that be a service sector or an industry sector, without having to convince people. And the human brain likes what it knows, and having a consistent personal brand is vital to generate a recognised and trusted brand, especially in this kind of cluttered social media world. In the 1970s, the human brain was exposed to about 500 branded images every day. That's closer now to 5,000 images. So you've got to find ways of standing out to be instantly recognised. So what you've got to decide today is, well, what do I want to be instantly known and recognised for? Now, that could be the property tax expert, it could be the charities expert, it could be the data protection expert, but you need to define what it is that I want people to instantly see me as the go-to expert. Reputation. So given that word of mouth generally in our world is the best form of marketing, clients recommend other businesses to you or other individuals to you, professional referrers recommend to you, and that's always the best kind of lead. And essentially it's free if you've delivered that good service. So third-party endorsement is, without question, 80% of everything that we should be doing in our marketing activity and in our personal branding. Having raving fans to use the right words when they talk about you is helpful if you give them the right words to talk about you. So when you're developing your reputation, you've got to put lots of content out there that helps people sell you. And we'll come on to talk about that a bit later on. And then finally, respect. Personal brand really sets your trust currency, because the level of respect people have for your expertise correlates directly with how much they're prepared to pay for your services. And I'm just going back to the people that we looked at earlier. You know, we're living in the age of the authentic brand, and you have to deliver what you promise, or over deliver, which is even better. And what you've got to think about here is, what am I actively doing to create and generate respect for my personal brand? And this comes down to consciously giving advice, tips, tools, speak at events, post helpful comments in social media groups, share things on LinkedIn, post useful, informative content on how to do things on LinkedIn, and building this kind of blanket of content around your expertise will all help to deliver around those 3 R's of personal branding. All right, so let's just have a look at where you might be at the moment. And I've broken this down into these different steps, which I'm going to call the 5 levels of visibility. So let's just start here. So you may be what we call a resident expert, and a resident expert is usually somebody that's well respected within the firm and by their clients, but they probably have little visibility outside of those audiences. And it's fair to say that I think certainly most individuals will always start here. Yeah, you've built up an area of expertise that's well known internally. Your clients know what that expertise is, but it's probably not much wider than that. You've then got what I call local heroes. Now, local heroes will be individuals that are becoming known outside of the firm. They're probably more active in their local business community. They may speak at business functions, probably regular bloggers, and will usually have a business development remit. So responsible in some way for bringing new work into the firm. I know everybody's got that responsibility, but they probably do it better than others. So are you a resident expert or are you a local hero? You may be better than that, which is actually what I'd call a rising star. Now, this is where you've developed a much wider reputation, which has probably now gone regional. Fairly well known among the peers in your area. You probably speak and write frequently on your area of expertise. And you're the type of individual that will tend to bring in higher quality business and charge higher fees for it. Okay, now we're really climbing the ladder here. So this is now industry rock stars. So this is where you are known across your region or maybe nationally now for your niche area of expertise. As an industry rock star, you will attract premium clients and fees. As a result, you've become a significant asset to your firm. Okay, now just to give you an example of this, we work with a client who has had a passion and an interest in working in the hospitality industry. Their firm has a fair number of hospitality businesses as clients, but he's gone one step further than that to become an industry rock star. He's now part of the professional bodies that support the hospitality sector. He speaks regularly for them. He writes regularly for them. He's part of their lobbying committee, which is obviously working with government legislation to change things for the hospitality industry, and has really carved a niche into that sector. It's now taken it one step further, which is to become a niche within a niche, which is to become the expert on the trunk legislation, which is obviously how tips are paid and accounted for to staff. So not only can you become an industry rock star, but you can niche within that sector at the same time. And the final one is global superstar, and this is the world's elite expert. So global superstars have really broken out of their niches, have become recognised more broadly in their chosen industry sector or area of expertise, and they command the highest fees, and the firms and the world want to be associated with them. So they become the go-to expert for clients. And what you've got to figure out on this journey is which of this level best describes where you are today and where you want to get to. And it may be that you know, I'm a resident expert at the moment and I'd really just like to be a local hero, or I'm on this step of local hero and I really want to be an industry rock star. But that's how you set your path as to how you're going to develop that personal brand. So before we all jump immediately to being a global superstar, you've got to keep in mind that each step along the way requires more time and effort than the step below it, which is a fairly obvious statement to make. So for instance, it's generally easier to move from resident expert to local hero than to get to the industry rock star or global superstar. You've got to invest time in getting there, and you need to make a decision as to whether you've got that dedication and commitment to take that personal brand journey. Excuse me. Interesting thing here, though, is that a global superstar can usually command a 13 times higher fee than a local hero. Okay, and this is because your clients will be willing to pay a premium for the experts they believe in. They're willing to shell out the extra for the confidence that a visible expert will bring in their knowledge and their experience to their problem. They'll perceive that it will be solved more quickly with a greater positive outcome. And higher billing rates, being at these two levels of industry or global, aren't the only benefit. Usually being more visible attracts more media attention. So if a journalist wants an authoritative quote, they'll come to you first. You're probably better placed as well to secure valuable partnerships more easily with more desirable organisations. You'll attract instantly better quality clients because those clients will seek out an expert, and that cuts out the competitive proposal process entirely. And that kind of gives you the key so that you know that it's working. And experts with strong personal brands, you know, also benefit the firm as a whole. So this is what I call the halo effect, where an expert's reputation spills over to the organisation that you work at, and that can have real effects on the firm's brand and the business development prospects. So according to research, about 2/3 of visible experts on average have this effect on their firm. Okay, so I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty now. And I think one of the most important things that I've learned from working with the clients that we do on personal branding particularly was looking at which marketing tools have the greatest impact on your personal brand. So I've rated these on a kind of 1, which is least impactful, to 10, which is most impactful. Okay, so obviously if you can produce a book, that's great. And there are lots of self-publishing tools out there now that allow you to do this really quite easily. And I'm just going back to my examples here. It could be that you are, you know, a property tax expert. You could self-publish very easily a book around property tax, maybe focus it particularly on landlords, for example, or focus it on non-UK residents and the property tax issues that surround them. Self-publish that and then use that as part of your branding collateral. Speaking opportunities, always great. They allow you to see, you know, the whites of the eyes of your potential clients. And then you're using things like blogs, email marketing, your website. It may even be that you want to look at having a personal website that's wholly focused on your particular areas of expertise. So these are what we call microsites that sit alongside your firm's website, but create really strong landing pages for anybody looking for that particular area of expertise. Okay, so now it's really time to look at how all of those different aspects can be brought into a personal branding roadmap. If you've made it this far, yeah, and you're committed to a long-term program to build your personal brand, you need to have a marketing plan to support it. So that means setting some objectives, turning the roadmap into a formal plan, and updating the plan as you go along, where we can bring in new ideas to help develop that. So step one, just go back to those steps that we talked about earlier. You need to determine where you are today. Yeah. So resident expert, global superstar. Yeah. Identify then your specialist area of expertise. So if you're already an expert in something, but that's fairly broad, yeah, so property tax, GDPR, data protection, whatever that area might be, can you niche it a little bit further? Because the more niche your expertise, the easier your rise will be. Third step is to define the audience. So who's going to be buying my services and who will influence those buyers, and what industries do we serve? Yeah. And this is the part of the marketing plan that says, let's define the audience that we want to promote this area of expertise out to, and also the influencers in those audiences. You've then got to find your angle. This step isn't absolutely required, but it can really help your personal brand to stand out. And if you can become associated with an issue, I'll just go back to the hospitality client who has associated themselves with the trunk issue. You can often find it easier to get noticed. So having an angle gives you the anchor and a unique perspective that will mark each piece of content that you put out as your own. You've then got to decide what tools that you're going to use. So if we head back to that slide about speaking or books or blogging or microsites, whatever that might be, you need to assess what tools that you're going to use and which ones you can actually commit to producing content for. Assess your skills. So this is perhaps the most challenging part of the programme. Not because it takes a great deal of effort, but because it's really hard to be objective about your own strengths and weaknesses. So go through what you think your skills and expertise are, assess them on how strong or how weak they might be, and build those into your marketing plan. And then finally, you need to determine who's going to help you, because all of us need a little help along this pathway. Some of us will need more than others, but the thing to decide really is, where am I going to get that help from? So your marketing department, your content producers, are you going to need help with videos? Are you going to need help with identifying the right groups to approach or professional bodies to approach for speaking opportunities? Map out in your marketing plan where you're going to need that help, and then obviously you've got to go find it. Okay, so some tips in that. I've got 10 personal branding tips here. So if you've got a pen or pencil to hand, grab it now. First one is be authentic. Yeah, go back to the examples that I gave earlier. Most important aspect of a personal brand is to stay true to yourself. And if you try and craft a brand that isn't true to you, it becomes really hard to maintain it over the long term. So your audience, clients need to be able to recognise that it's you. And when you're not being genuine, they can lose trust in you very quickly. And distrust is detrimental to everything in life, but particularly to the personal brand that you're trying to build. So if you want to make genuine connections, yeah, be authentic. Talk about your interests in the content that you're putting out, and try where you can to build your personal brand around the things that really interest you. So much like being authentic with the way that you put your content out, if your brand is a true reflection of your interests and lifestyle, then it's going to be a lot easier to maintain over time. And holding conversations and creating content about the things that you already enjoy is much simpler than trying to chase an audience that you might believe is more lucrative, but isn't one that has your full attention when it comes to your passion. Use what makes you different. So identify the aspects of yourself that make you unique. So consider what makes you different from your competitors. And a personal brand is about sharing your personal perspective with your target audience. And you've got to think about what is your unique angle there. So, for example, if you've worked in a particular industry from a very young age, have seen significant changes over time, you can offer real value by just commenting on the trends that you've witnessed. And the more unique your personal brand is, the more memorable it becomes. Tell a story. People will listen far more easily to anecdotal stories. Yeah, and this is the one thing that Elon Musk does very well. He refers back constantly to, well, when I did this, or this happened to me. If you're producing blogs or social media content, craft them into that cohesive narrative of anecdotal stories. And this is where you can really bring your interest, your personality, and your history into your expertise. Learn from others. So following the footsteps of people that you aspire to, look up to. Somebody said to me when I was very young, always surround yourself with people that are more successful than you. Otherwise, you'll never learn anything. And I thought, absolutely right. And through life, I think that's very true. So have a look at what those you aspire to do well, and then look at how you can bring that into your own personal brand. Always be helpful. Being helpful is an important element of any personal brand. You need to share your knowledge. You need to give it away. I say give it away, not give it away for free, but don't put a piece of content out on social media and then ask people to leave an email address to pick it up. Make it accessible. There are different ways of harvesting emails than putting barriers in front of somebody who actually just wants to get access to your knowledge. Make sure that you're consistent. Don't sort of swap around different areas of expertise. If you've chosen property tax as your area of expertise, stick to it and focus on one thing at a time. You'll find that you can very quickly become overwhelmed in what you've got to do versus the client work that you've got to do. So try and focus on one aspect at a time. If that's producing a blog this week or producing a video this week, then that's the thing that you need to do, rather than thinking, oh, well, I've got these 10 things that I've got to do in my marketing plan. Pick the one that you're going to achieve that week. And then look at ways in which you can connect with your target audience. So when you choose different methods of communication, you can spread your brand awareness much wider, more quickly. And remember that some people prefer email, some people prefer social media, some people prefer to see you speak, some people would rather read an article that you put together. There isn't a one size fits all in the content that you need to produce. You've got to appeal to lots of different media that your audience will prefer to engage with. They won't all choose one platform. And what you'll see happen here is that your brand will follow exactly the same methodology that people like Nike and Coke and Rolex have all followed. It's just about identifying what is it that makes me different from my competitors. For some of these brands, it's endorsement. Yeah. So, if Kanye West is seen wearing the latest Rolex, that gives an endorsement to that luxury brand. For you, it's about producing and amplifying the really good client case studies that you get. And those endorsements make your brand or the marketing of your brand no different to how Nike, Coke or Rolex do it. this is probably one of the key questions that you need to ask yourself at the start of this is, what is it that makes my service? What is it that makes a difference? And there's what I call the 15-word challenge on this one. And do this after this session today, but just take the time to write down 15 words that describe what it is, yeah, that makes you or your service different, and what is it that makes a difference to your clients. So I've got my 15 words, which is a recognised marketing expert to the professional services sector, helping firms to increase their visibility. Yeah, it was 29 words originally, so I've had to hone it down, but just take that 15-word challenge. And no matter what you're doing today, there are 4 things that you've got to measure yourself against. And I think for me, that's being a good colleague at work, because you want people within the firm to talk about you. You've got to be an exceptional expert at something that has real value. You've got to be a bit visionary, so a leader, a teacher in what you're doing. And then 4th, which is being obsessed slightly with getting some good outcomes from spending a lot of time on your personal branding. Okay, so just to finish off, it's really this simple. Each of us are a brand. You're in charge of your brand. There isn't a single path to personal brand success, but there is methodology behind it. And we've taken, accountants through this process where they're now recognised as the go-to property expert. I know I've picked on that, but we've got them as the go-to person with the Association of Residential Landlords or the Association of Residential Managing Agents. They've become the go-to individual for Knight Frank, for example, and it hasn't been an overnight instant win. It's taken time. On average, it takes 2 years to start building a personal brand, to see to get you from that sort of resident expert up to an industry rock star. But it's all doable, and I'm sure every one of us today has got an area of expertise or an industry sector that we've got some real passion about, some real expertise in. And by getting some help along the way, you can become that go-to expert. You can become, as I mentioned earlier, that unicorn. Okay, I'm going to hand back to you, Marie, if that's okay.
That's really brilliant, Jo. Thank you very much for that. That was excellent. I've taken quite a few notes, and I actually have a question for you before I dive into the questions that have come in. So I was just thinking through, I just wrote down all of your top tips, and it strikes me there was 1 or 2 of them where I think we all see kind of a few protagonists out there on LinkedIn, for example, who obviously take personal brand very seriously, but I think there's 1 or 2 of them that particularly I see habitually that seem to take it a bit too far. So there's obviously a fine line between credibility and then going beyond that. I mean, do you have any guidance on that?
I think I go back to the points I made in the presentation about authenticity, Marie. I think, I've had clients come to us before who say, right, we really want to focus on this particular industry sector. Yeah. And I've asked why. Yeah. And it's just that it's been seen as a very lucrative market to go after, but essentially there isn't any real expertise in the firm. There isn't an individual that's even got the time to spend developing that area of expertise. So I think in all of that, first of all, challenge yourself, yeah, but secondly, be realistic about have we got the right level of expertise, and how do we hone that?
Great, thank you. And there's one thing that you were talking about earlier on that really struck home. So you mentioned the business with the trunk expertise, and as soon as you said trunk, I thought I knew who you were referring to. As soon as you said trunk, I thought I know exactly who you mean. And I've not listened to this for those that are listening in today. I haven't heard this presentation before today. So it goes to show that there is a lot of power in what we're doing. So just moving on to some of the questions we've had come in during the session, Joe. So firstly, Simon's asked if you're able to provide some guidance or links to self-publishing functions. He's given his email address. I'll pass it on to you later so you can make contact. But are there sort of places, names that you can mention now?
This is for self-publishing books.
Yes.
Yeah, it depends on your your area of expertise as to which one I would direct you to, because there are lots of them.
Right.
So we tend to when we're doing initial self-publishing, depending on whether we're going to print or whether we're going to ebook, because you can actually do it on Amazon. So there are tools on Amazon which are really, really easy to use for self-publishing, and then that puts it into the Kindle store as well, into the Amazon store. So that helps. There are other publishing sites, which is if you're just going to go, you don't necessarily have to do written published content. It can be audio now as well, and there are channels that we use for audio publications, because sometimes clients find it easier to talk than write. So you can do it either way, but yeah, I can let you have a list, and there are lots of them.
Great stuff. We'll put you in touch with Simon later on in that case. Right, so another question that's come in. What's the biggest challenge for a partner or director who wants to improve their personal brand and become an industry expert?
The biggest single challenge?
Yeah.
Okay. Time. It's always, I don't think in most firms that there aren't individuals that don't want to do this. I think what it comes down to is whether they've actually got the time to devote to it. And I wouldn't underestimate the amount of time that you do have to put into doing this, because if you want to move from that kind of, resident expert up to an industry rock star, for example, or even just get yourself a couple of steps up that ladder, you've got to get out there and speak. You've got to produce content and push out there. You've got to engage with social media. And I think that the biggest obstacle will always be how much time that you can put into it. And that's why on one of the tips that I gave, it's get help. Because if you can find individuals to work with that maybe can produce content for you, or can help you with finding the right organisations to work with, to reach out to create the speaking opportunities for you, or the networking opportunities for you, then that contributes massively to that challenge. But yeah, without question, the biggest challenge is always going to be time.
Very good, thank you. Next question for you then. So how much time should you spend each week on developing your personal brand?
Again, I'm going to be realistic here, and this is come from the clients that we work with, but generally I would say that at least half a day a week needs to be focused on this. Now, it may be that half a day is spent because you've got to go and speak at an event, for example, or you've got to prep and deliver for a webinar. Yeah, it could be that half a day is actually working with your content producer to create some blogs, etc., that you want to post in the following week, or building up some connections on LinkedIn, or contributing to some new media forums. But I think if you're going to niche market effectively, which is essentially what building a personal brand is all about, you've got to devote at least 3 or 4 hours a week to it.
That's great, thank you. And that's obviously quite a lot of time for accountants where they've got multiple competing priorities, I guess. And the last question I've got for you today, so how do you research the right entities to start to niche your personal brand?
Okay, so again, if you look at I'm just going to take my property tax example, Marie, because it's probably the easiest one to talk around. I think what you've got to look at is, first of all, does our website reflect that expertise to start off with, and build out your website to really focus on that area that you're looking at. The second thing is to look at the professional bodies that support that particular niche market. So within the property sector, you know, there are the overarching organisations that support landlords or managing agents, etc. You need to have a look at whether you can become an affiliate member of one of those organisations. Affiliate membership usually gives you the opportunity then to be able to contribute to their newsletters, to have opportunities to go to their events, to start developing your brand within those organisations. The other thing that's really important in all of this is client case studies. So if you've got you know, property clients that you're already dealing with, you need them to be giving you good endorsements. They should go on the website, they should go as links on any social media content they're putting out. I'd then look at the social media platforms that support that niche sector. Where is your audience likely to be? Do we need to buy an email database? And then finally, you can start to look at whether there are other complementary referrers that you need to get closer to. And in the property world, the easiest one to get closest to is your estate agents, and start working with them on their landlord clients. So just using that as an example, you can see how the marketing plan starts to build out.
That's very helpful, thank you. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the questions that I've got for you. So just by way of thanking Joe and Mark, thank you for joining us today. The K3 Hub team will be back on the 2nd of December with our guest speaker, Jeremy Mindell, who will be presenting a tax for non-tax specialist CPD session. So do keep your eyes peeled on your inbox, and more details will be winding their way to you next week. Again, thanks very much to our speakers. Thank you to everybody that's joined us today. Hopefully I'll see you on the 2nd of December. But until then, enjoy the rest of the day. We look like we're getting you off a little bit earlier than we'd originally planned today. And I hope you all managed to get some downtime over the weekend. Thank you very much.